All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Bros Talking Soccer podcast. My name is Dave Knittel, and I'm here live in person with Jim Rutter, CEO of YourSports. Jim, hello.
Good morning.
Excited to actually have you here at, Knittel Corporate, Bureau of Bros Talking Soccer.
This is Serious Soccer Studio, and I'm surrounded with vibrant colors and representation of various club histories and logos. It's pretty amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we're excited to have you here. Props for you.
An studio guest.
Exactly, coming in person. I think you are our first one, so very excited about that. If you are joining us live on YouTube, say hello. We have the chat feature up here in the background, and I'll be monitoring that, as we go along here. And or if you're watching in the future, feel free to leave a comment. We can follow up with Jim if you have any questions, concerns, or anything like that. And I think we're ready to get into it. This podcast will be out on Wednesday. I'm not sure if I told you that, but it'll be out Wednesday late our time. So, Tuesday late our time, very early Wednesday. So
great.
Look for that on Bros Talking Soccer. All right. I think any last questions or anything like that?
No questions.
All right. I'm going to do another intro again. So I'd like to welcome on Jim Rutter, CEO of YourSports, which is a social networking site for sports fans. Jim, welcome to Bros Talking Soccer. How you doing?
Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you here in person. So first off, did I get the YourSports kind of nomenclature correct with social networking?
Yeah, YourSports is an interesting animal. We are you could call us a social networking start. It is an emerging sports-centric social media platform, and actually we're expanding, and we'll be changing the name of the company actually, which I could get into later. But we are expanding beyond sports into covering all aspects, the entire spectrum of the social graph. So, the social graph was sort of pioneered by Facebook in helping determine, people's likes, dislikes. It's an authentic identity based platform that includes everything from where you've gone to school, where you've worked, the teams you've played on, the teams you follow, if you've coached, and basically every other aspect of your life. We've broken down the human experience, the journey through life, and sort of found a way to break that down into DNA. And so you're able to take real life experiences, interests, affiliations, affinity, achievement, personality, identity. All these things are broken down into digital form. And you'd be surprised how you can express or manifest your life experience in digital form to the extent you want to do that. But the whole purpose is to drive commonality of interest, to drive commonality of experience, find out who shares your passion, whether it be for a football club or for a particular player, or you're part of a fan base, or maybe you played soccer, you coach soccer, your kid coaches soccer, your uncle played for Bayern Munich. The ability to determine what are the interesting things about another person. And, for fans, people that enjoy not just consuming content about their team, but also enjoying the relationship that they have with other soccer fans, with other people that not are only soccer fans, but maybe they enjoy drinking wine, or they speak German, or they like to travel to multiple countries. I mean, this is how you ferret out what makes another person tick and whether you would want to be friends with them. I mean, you can imagine this has ramifications for ancestry, for leaving your legacy, for dating. I mean, anything that determines professional networking, anything that determines who you are, what someone would want to know about you, and how do you make that available without the danger that social media has represented for many people in their minds. Mainstream social media, particularly recently, has been concerned with privacy, concerned with security, and I look at privacy concerns as primarily being things like your physical whereabouts. Are you being geo-tracked? Where are you? If you're on vacation, do you really want to let someone know that that your house is sitting empty? Or your financial information or your health information. Those are the things that people are primarily concerned about, not whether they played on an AYSO team in 1987. That's not the kind of thing that you'd be probably unwilling to disclose, or that if you like to collect teacups. I mean, you might have something unusual about you that really, when does someone find that out? They find it out maybe for an older person in an obituary. You read these wonderful things about this person. He stormed the beaches at Normandy. He played on the Italian national soccer team. He once met Pele. I mean, these are things, unique life experiences that have not had the technology, have not had the platform to be able to capture interesting things and be able to share that with others. Let's say I've been to the World Cup, or I've been to, I scored a goal to win a game in college, or I was a finalist for an award, or whatever it may be. This is really taking advantage of developments in data technology and the ability to capture, organize, and then present back to friends, family, former teammates, anyone you'd be interested in hanging with that will know more about you. And that's in this day and age where people are concerned with the preponderance of activity online. People are gaming, people are watching sports online. That's all wonderful, but that human element of building relationships, building friendships, it can actually be made better by technology, or at least enhanced, not as a complete substitute for one-on-one personal relationships like coming down here into the studio, right? But the reality is, let's use technology for a good way to help create better understanding, better familiarity, better knowledge. I mean, just the ability to follow your team, know who's on the roster, know if there are supporter groups, know when the games are going to be on. Are there events you can go to? What is the history of this club? You've done some wonderful in the tavern. You've done some wonderful history of clubs, and you learn. How many times did they make it into the Champions League final, or were they in the Europa Cup, or whatever it may be that is part of their history and legacy. Fans tend to be very proud of that. Athletes tend to be very proud of their accomplishments. Were they the runner-up for the top award in whatever level of soccer they're playing? These are things that are part of their resume, and our company name is going to be Vitae, like a curriculum vitae. So it's basically your life resume, and Vitae means life in Latin. And so we're an internationally focused company. We're looking at the entire experience of life and the journey through life, and being able to put all that together. We think it is better long-term for us to encompass a lot more than just sports, although clearly our foundation is built in sports at every level, whether you're a player, a coach, a fan, at every level, in every country in the world. And that is a formidable task. It's an ambitious undertaking to try and take not only every sport at every level, but then do it in every country and do it in every historical season it's ever been played in. So taking history, which is very different than a Facebook or a Twitter and all, we're really bringing in history. So you could take someone's grandfather that, maybe they played for Everton or whoever it was. You've got some connection. Like, how many families wouldn't want to preserve the history of a grandfather that, was one of the original New York Cosmos or whatever it may be? That's a wonderful thing that they probably want to share with their friends, with their family, with their kids. What's the legacy you pass on about your soccer experience? How are you going to know that, not just that your grandfather lived from 1920 to 1984, but that maybe he served in the military, or he was in a fraternity, or he attended soccer games, or he did something wonderful. How do you get that beyond just the tombstone?
Yeah.
And social media allows you to do that.
Yeah. How do you actually learn more about him or her or whoever
what was his favorite ice cream flavor?
Yeah.
Was he left-handed? Maybe his first car was a Mustang. I mean, these are the things that make it more unique than just reading about the years, the lifespan of an individual, because you're not going to take much with you. And that's not really what we like to think of is using this information to build, add to, and connect a person's profile, living or dead. It could be someone from 100 years ago, but it's like, how do you connect them and then preserve a little bit of digital immortality for them? It's a small slice of immortality to take who you were and what you did and put that into a place where people can relate to it and appreciate it and talk about it, engage around it, all of this.
Absolutely. No, it's very cool and very fascinating. So that's where you're headed. I'd like to take a step back and look maybe kind of where you've been and how you've gotten to this point. So specifically with YourSports, how did you get involved in YourSports, and what's the journey been like? Maybe a little bit of history of, I don't even know when you guys started, and then kind of how you've gotten to this point. So
sure, the company's been around for a while. It sort of has evolved. Probably started focusing on being a social network built around a database about 7 years ago, and it's taken a long time, because this is not like a Facebook or a Pinterest or a LinkedIn where the network is simply the sum total of the people that have joined it. We actually have pre-populated a substantial amount of data in here. So we have every college team, every sport, every high school team in America, and each sport. So the user coming in will have an incredibly rich array of connections to make when they come on. Were they in the 82nd Airborne? Were they did they serve on the USS Arizona in World War II? Did they play field hockey in junior high school? I mean, this is all the depth that we're looking to allow someone to have when they come in. So having that array of connections available means you have to create it all. The stadiums have to be in there. The events have to be in there. The trophies you could win as a team or as an individual or as a coach, those all have to be put together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're gonna win, let's say the World Cup. Well, the World Cup is a series. Then there's an individual World Cup for a particular year. Then there are the teams that participate in it. There are the sponsors. There are the teams that play in it. The managers, the players, the sponsors of the teams, the supporter groups. I mean, it's an incredible community built around this sport, which, you know, we have got 196 countries or something in the world, and soccer's played from youth all the way to pro, and certainly in many of those countries. Not all of them have pro leagues, and then you go, like, the Swiss leagues have 9 levels of soccer, right? They're not all total professional, but I mean, by the time you work your way through, and then you've got relegation and promotion, you've got all this going on. So there's incredibly huge amounts of data. You have players that have played for 16 different clubs, you know, youth clubs, academies, U17 national teams. And so it's really an amazing amount of entities that you need to account for to be able to connect people up. And so we've actually pre-populated a lot of athletes, teams, federations, governing bodies, and all. And then that will eventually be claimable for any athlete to come in and go, wow, I've got a profile here that's like blowing the doors off of anything that exists. I mean, you've got things like Wikipedia and some of the pure data sites, but this isn't just data that you would look up and say, okay, who played for Dortmund in 1995? No, this is actually connected data, not just static data and links, but everything's connected in a network. Who else played for that team? Who else played for that team in that year? Who are the all-time greatest players? And so the ability to have it be truly connected in a network is unique, and that's where we think, you know, large part of the differentiation is. And it's really interesting to see where people have played, who they were on loan to. You know, how have athletes, what path have they taken during their professional careers? And it's really pretty fascinating. Then you find out also, well, where did they go to school? What did they major in? You know, what do they do for work? What else are they involved in? What charities do they support? This is all part of what makes up the individual. You're not just someone who played Reyes, that just was unfortunately lost in the car accident. You know, to see his background and see how many of the Spanish clubs he played for, and then he was playing off in China, and then he went to a second level team. You see what happened during his lifetime. It's a shame to lose him, but in a way, he stays with us because we get to see, where did he play? Who did he play with? When did he make all of his moves? Where did he come from originally? And I personally find that very fascinating. It's a blend of history, so the past, present, and future of a person's experience can be well chronicled on YourSports.
Yeah, no, I love the concept, and, you know, I've been using the platform for quite some time. So how do you approach populating this data? Do you have a team? Are you do you use Wikipedia as a starting point? Do you, like, how do you actually go about finding this? Let's say specifically
let's back way up, right? Let's back up and look at the Earth, right? You've got an Earth, and there are people doing something down on the planet, right? So you know, soccer has a long history going back into the 19th century, right? So you look at soccer worldwide, and clearly you know, you'd start with, okay, what's the highest level played? And if you want to say it's the national teams in the World Cup, or it's the professional teams in the top leagues, and then you're going to the UK, Spain, Italy, Germany, France. You can put France in there as well. And then if you're into the Latin soccer, you can look at the Mexican league, the Argentine, Brazilian leagues. But I mean, basically the major European leagues are where the top level talent ends up playing. No offense to MLS, and we like to see that, you know, evolve over time. But whether it's La Liga or Bundesliga or the Premier League, took me years to say Premier instead of Premier, but I learned. But you know, the fact is, you've got the high revenue generating clubs within the high revenue leagues, and these leagues have international followings. I mean, you look at Real Madrid and Barcelona; they have, we're talking about 100 million people following these teams. It's incredible. From a social media standpoint, now it's enabled people in the Philippines to be huge fans of Real Madrid or Barcelona, which was more difficult to do. I mean, when I was growing up, my exposure to international soccer was practically nil. I learned, as did one of your previous guests, I learned about English soccer through listening to Monty Python. The minute I heard about the Hammers and the Wolverhampton Wanderers, that's my first exposure was who, because it wasn't on television. You didn't have access. You didn't have NBC bringing you a Premier League matchup on a Saturday morning that you could just tune into. So very difficult to see soccer, certainly the 70s, 80s. And my first personal, let's call it, move into fascination with the sport came in the 1982 World Cup. I happened to be an exchange student in Austria, and those games were all carried. And so I ended up watching Italy and Germany and France all in the semifinals, and then Italy ends up winning over Germany, and it was just amazing stuff. Paolo Rossi, and so I was like, "Wow, what is this sport?" I've been watching football, basketball, and baseball, and here it was on all the time. So I got to see the games. People were going nuts around me, and by the end of the thing, I knew who was taking the penalty kicks for the Germans, in crunch time. And it was amazing stuff. So that was my first big experience with that. And then Argentina followed up winning in 86, back in Maradona's era. And so I started saying, wow, this really does have a massive following. So that always stuck with me. And when we were building out the foundation for YourSports and looking at all the sports we're going to cover, well, naturally, the largest sport with the most expansive following, played at the most levels, with the richest and longest history, with the highest profile teams, athletes, and followings. I mean, it was a natural to make sure that we built that out. So what do you have to do? Well, when you have a database, essentially, and you're building that out, there are plenty of places to acquire basic data. That's not the magic. The magic is how you put it all together. How do you make this all useful, and how do you get a dividend, a result out of your connecting of that data? And so to put everything together, you have to bring in all the venues, right? You've got, whether it's a stadium in the U.S. or it's a stadium in Spain or in Croatia. I mean, you have to have stadiums. You have to have the different leagues. You have to have the competitions. So this was an unusual thing. How do you put together not only the league competition, but now you've got these regional competitions and continental cups. And so by the time you go through the different club and the national team competitions, and you see that people have careers playing for the Portugal national team, men's national team, but then they also play for Porto or whoever it may be. It gets pretty complex, and then to make sure you have it covered and you have promotion and relegation, you have to go down. Well, what's the next level?
Yeah,
what's the second level of Scottish soccer? What's the eighth level of English soccer? And it's the history and the moving around and the reformation of leagues. And the minute you go below the big leagues, now you got financial considerations, because some of these clubs open, close, run out of money. Have in Italy, it's really quite a colorful history for a lot of these clubs. You could be around for 90 years and be gone the next year. So beyond, if you don't have major sponsorship and television deals, and if you can't sell tickets if you're not winning, it's going to be tough to keep these clubs surviving. So there's that makes it challenging and interesting. I mean, we've picked we've made it as hard as possible. Let's not only go after the biggest sport with the most teams, leagues, and players, and constantly changing, but also, why don't we just also cover history? And why stop in Europe and Latin America? Let's make sure we do China and India and New Zealand and Australia as well. And you get down to South Africa. If you're going to be of interest to South African fans, you're not going to just be able to do soccer. You got to do rugby and cricket and everything else. So it's a formidable undertaking, but I think we're just the guys to do it.
I love it. Well, yeah, lofty goals there. You mentioned a couple things. I want to switch back over to the personal and just hear about your experience in 1982 World Cup. What was it like? We see the World Cup nowadays, fan fests are a big thing. Everybody gathering in public parks. They got it on the big screen. What was it like watching the World Cup, back 82 and 86? Were you gathering in public places? Were you going to the bar? Were you watching in a house that, you said you were in exchange?
Yeah, I was exposed because they had I don't know what their television network was at the time, but it was prominent enough that it was on constantly. And that was something, I mean, even with the NFL, you were lucky to get like the game of the week in the 80s. There was no Thursday night football. You get Monday night football, but you had Sundays and Mondays. This thing was on every day, so I was like, I wouldn't say I was cutting class, but I was certainly getting home from school very quickly to catch more games. And I was in the time zone, right? So many of the World Cups are taking place all over the world. I mean, it's been, I did go to the World Cup in '94 when it was held here.
That's cool.
But whether it's in South Africa or it's in Brazil or wherever it is, it can be in Spain, France. Your timing can be difficult, right? Yeah. So trying to catch that critical Iceland-Greece matchup. I'd say in Austria, they were primarily looking at the German team. And even though Austria follows their national team, a lot of them are following the German team as well. So here I was like celebrating when the Italians would score and get in trouble. But I'd been exposed to soccer. I played AYSO, and we had soccer before we even had football in Menlo Park, where I grew up. So youth soccer was there, but after you were done, there wasn't no more soccer. I don't even know if my high school, I guess, had a soccer team, but I wasn't all that familiar with it. So by the time I got over as an exchange student and I saw what this culture was like, and it was on all the time and people were stopping everything to watch, I said, wow, this is impressive. Then I realized, well, the clubs, I went to a few small club matches around my community. And here we're in the middle of an alpine valley and people are getting out to play soccer on days that I probably, would have been staying under the covers. But they were committed to it. And then I saw that the celebration, the style, the chants, the singing, the color, the scarves, the bells, I had never really seen that. I mean, we had great fan support for football and baseball and all, but not quite at the level, the passionate level. And I actually saw it in hockey before I saw it in soccer. I went to, there's a Austrian hockey team in Feldkirch, which is in Vorarlberg, which is near the Swiss border. And I went to these, it was called the VEU, the Vorarlberger Eishockey Union. And I went to those matches. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This is like a drunken rager going on, but these people were so fun. I was 17 years old. I'm like, I've never seen anything like this. People are bumping into each other. They're passing people around in the crowd. And I said, wow, this is amazing for ice hockey. And I hadn't had that much exposure to ice hockey. Then I went to soccer games and I'm like, well, these people are really, really passionate, and seeing the scarves and seeing the banners, and it's just in the constant singing. And I found it unusual. And so here I was, an exchange student. I was interested in other cultures and practices and languages. And also it was particularly interesting to see this applied in the sports realm. So I said, wow, there's got to be something really to this. And then as you watch more of a sport, you get to know more about the rules and the style of play and the individuals. I mean, I think in any sport, it's really important, which is why social media can be so great. The more you know about the team and its players, and you recognize faces, and soccer's a great sport because you can actually see the faces. Football can be tough. You don't even know who the guys are half the time. More like basketball, where you can really see the faces and expressions and hear the voices. And so for soccer, just such the exposure was enough to get me, pretty interested. And they had some big stars too. It was like Karl-Heinz Rummenigge was one of the big Germans at the time, and Stielke. And I just remember these guys still, and it's 30 something years ago. But that sticks with you. And I would end up trying to catch soccer games when I could, then traveling around Europe and seeing it played in different countries and all was pretty great.
That's very cool. And so then, you get kind of hooked, or at least exposed to it in the 80s, and then you went to the World Cup in 94. Can you talk us through maybe a little bit of your, I guess, do you support any teams now? Do you follow the game? When did you, as the game has been on television more and more?
Yeah, no, it's probably going to disappoint some of your audience that I'm a Barcelona guy.
Okay.
I got a little bit hooked. We went to Barcelona. I've been 3 times in the last 5 years. Went to Camp Nou, cool. Went to the stadium. My son's, getting the Neymar jersey and shorts, which we, by the way, had to burn. Yeah, because it's interesting for my son. He's a 11-year-old now, but he was super into Neymar. And then the minute he left Barcelona, he's like, get this away from me. And it was great. So he's a big, messy guy, Suarez. And it was fun to see my son through some of our European travels, and particularly like last summer during the World Cup. I mean, we came back from our trip. He's got 4 jerseys. He's got Griezmann and Ronaldo, and he was just so into soccer, into football. But why? Because he was seeing it. Right? Because he was exposed to it, and he was around other Europeans that were traveling with us. We happened to have been on a cruise at the time of the World Cup, and the entire cruise boat was like, United Nations going awesome. Nuts for every game. And they shut down all the other stuff that was going on the cruise when World Cup was on. So then everywhere we went, we're stopping, we're in Italy and France, and it's all about the World Cup. And so I think the more exposure you have, the more you understand it, the more you start to recognize the players. He started to get, when my son's commenting on, who should be starting in the front for Belgium, I'm like, all right, this is, they're starting to capture it. And, that was really great. And he plays some soccer, and that's been fun for us.
Very cool. Was the trip planned, or did it just happen to be during the World Cup? Was that something you consciously did?
No, it happened to be during the World Cup. And he got sort of into the habit of, as you do with your scarves, he started collecting jerseys, which is an expensive habit. And I kept dumbing it down, going, are you sure you need the one from the team store? Because the one with the embroidered letters is like 5 times as expensive as the one I can get from Jose on the corner there with, out of a shopping cart bag. It may not last as many times in the laundry, but I don't really know that the $100 jersey, with your custom name on the back needs to be for every team.
Yeah, especially, he's 11. He's probably going to grow out of it too, or hopefully.
That's why we got it. We're in St. Petersburg at one point. I'm like, okay, we're getting the bigger size because I'm not sure this one's going to be worn every day. And he's got a Rangers jersey. We're big Rangers fans from Glasgow, and so that happens to be one of the teams that I follow. I've got some friends in Glasgow, and because of them, I've become a little more avid. Like to, outside of the old firm rivalry with Celtic, it's a little hard to get super excited about it, just because nobody over here shares that interest yet, and we'll work on that.
Yeah.
But over there, it's got such a rich history, and Rangers, I guess, technically has probably won more league championships than almost any other club. So they've got a rich history and some really ardent followers. But I'm going to be in Glasgow this summer, and we'll get to hit a few of the Loudon Tavern and some of the places where they congregate and see what it's really all about.
All right, well, that'll be a really cool experience. You have to report back, tell us how it went.
Bring a scarf, right?
There you go. Yeah, scarves. I'll never say no to a scarf or anything like that. With Rangers, I know that they have Gerard as their manager right now, and they finished second this season. What do you think? Let's dig a little bit into it. What do you think it's going to take to knock Celtic off? Do you think that they're close? Do you think it's going to take a couple more years?
The parallel, the explanation, it's not an excuse, but an explanation. The Celtic payroll is way out of whack with Rangers or any of the other teams. In fact, it's almost impossible for any of the other Scottish teams to compete at the top of that league, just because of money, right? Yeah. So they have a much bigger payroll, and you can call attention to injuries or poor management or whatever it may be. Financially, it was tough for them a few years back, and they actually dropped really, really down. And it was a concern of what the future was going to hold for them, right? And so Celtic goes on this tear, and they're just, they're lapping the field. They're out by, 10 or more games, and so it was a competitive season this time around. I think again. Getting a high-profile manager certainly helps, but it's not like you're going to get more fans. You can't put any more fans into the place, right? So they get good support, but there's not as much TV money, there's not as much sponsorship money, and to compete, as when you're trying to compete with your talent gets drawn away to the Premier League teams, it's tough.
Yeah, so I know this has been thrown about on social media and, just regular media as well. What do you think about the concept of either Celtic, Rangers, or maybe some of the other Scottish teams trying to get into the English system, possibly starting, down in the fifth, sixth division and trying to work their way up. Do you see that?
Well, yeah. I mean, again, I haven't studied it enough to really have an informed opinion there, but I do know that would probably mean a real disaster for the Scottish League. Yeah. I mean, you could almost say goodbye to the Scottish League in terms of, without those teams. It would almost be more like having a couple of national teams participating in another league. So I don't know about that. Might be that they have to make peace with not playing at the very highest level. Again, I can't speak for them. I think anyone who's been associated with Rangers or Celtic for most of their lives, might be very sensitive to any insinuation that they couldn't compete at the highest levels. But that's tough, right? I mean, it's unusual in the UK. You've got multiple nations under one banner, and they compete at times as one country and at times individually.
They're together.
Yeah, in the Olympics they're together, and sometimes we play with Ireland and Northern Ireland in one competition, and Northern Ireland's back with the UK in another one. Britain, what's Britain, and it makes it a little difficult. In the pro leagues, I'd say. I'd have to really look at the financials to know how feasible that would be, but I would really worry about the rest of the teams. Yeah, because it's pretty fragile and has been for a long time. Financially, they've been on the brink for a while.
Yeah, I believe that. Steering the conversation back to YourSports, or I guess Vitae, potentially in the future, from a I guess soccer perspective. I know we kind of dug into what you guys have done so far, and I guess the goal would be to you guys keep populating everything yourselves, or is the goal to ultimately have people populate it themselves?
Yeah, it would be impossible for us to do everything ourselves, especially when you have the promotion relegation and you have the constant player transfers. Yeah. Awfully hard to keep track with a small staff, keep track of all that data. We're going to want to introduce the ability for users at some sort of moderator level to be able to manipulate data, to upgrade things. We want to make it possible for a user to do a lot to build their own profile, but you can't, if you and I want to say, we're the European Soccer Player of the Year, we won the Ballon d'Or or whatever we won, right? It's like, oh my gosh, if you let somebody say, I'm a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, or I'm a wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, I mean, people will take advantage of that. So there have to be levels of permissions. If you want to say, I played for Hamilton High School ice hockey, that we're probably going to let you claim. But if you want to say that I'm the starting quarterback for the 49ers, we might have to at least verify that. So you have to find a balance between user-generated content and user-generated updates to data, and then what we can reasonably handle on our own. But there's no question, we cannot be the ones to build out the 11th level of Colombian football. Yeah. It's not. Now, the good thing is once you create the clubs, the teams, you associate them with the leagues, you put the players on the roster, you show who the manager is, you show who the supporter groups are. Once you create all that, it's in the system, right? Then you move around to different leagues or teams. It's actually a lot easier to do. But we definitely, sort of the next generation of our interface will allow for users to take a lot more control, allow them to claim profiles, allow them to administer. Let's say you have someone that's going to administer the public profile for Rangers. Well, they're going to eventually want to have that ability to reach an audience through that profile of Rangers, and not have us be the ones. We're not trying to create content here. That is not our business to be content creators. We really want to be a content distribution platform where we say, okay, who are you trying to reach? You want to reach people who have self-identified as being fans of the San Jose Earthquakes. So if there's something about the Earthquakes, that needs to be tagged and gets to be in their, whether you want to call it a feed, they want to be notified of things relevant to their interest in a team. You want to get anything out to people that are going to give a rat's ass about it, right? When's the next game? What event can I go to at what bar? Where can I watch the game? Where are there going to be other people? What's news on my team? I'm not interested. I'm really not interested in the Cincinnati Bengals. I happen to be interested in the Indianapolis Colts. So if someone, I would subscribe to the Colts as a team I want to hear things about. But everybody has their own interests. And by the way, that's the other thing. You're curating your interest on any kind of social media platform that involves news. You're curating your interest. You have to decide, what do I want to hear about? Maybe I want to hear about, about a hip hop festival. Maybe I want to hear about a particular brand or company. We're trying to allow that curation to be by the user and by self-determination of what's of interest to them. And that can be done in a number of ways, but to have that be an option for them, it has to be in the system. So you have to create. On our side, we have to create, and we think this is a different approach taken by most mainstream social media platforms, but by pre-populating, we're doing a lot of that work for them, and then we'll allow them to claim it, whether it be a large sponsor. I mean, let's take Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola sponsors what? Players, teams, venues, leagues. There are so many different ways that corporations get involved in sports, and so it could be a race, it could be someone providing a kit or sponsoring the kit. So you've got all these sponsoring entities around sports. Well, those have to be in the system, and then eventually allow that company to claim it. And then they've got an entire broad portfolio of who are the teams they support, or who are they sponsoring, and what are they involved in. Chase is now going to be the Warriors venue name, right? Well, Chase is the Warriors venue name because they signed a $30-50 million sponsorship deal for those naming rights. Well, that goes on all over the world at all types of venues, and it's changing all the time. The leagues in Europe, I mean, it's a different league every 2 years in most of these, especially at the lower levels. And then you've got betting companies and banks and insurance companies, and those all have to be in the system. And then, once we have the resources to allow people to know what we have, and that's the thing about YourSports, people to have no idea what's in here. And it's really hard. We've got to work on our interface, our UI and UX to help people understand what's already in here. We've built this thing for the long term, and it's got an incredible amount of information in there. But we need to be able to draw that out and help people understand how better, how they can use it, how that's going to be of value to them to attract their participation in the platform, and their participation not only as a follower of sports, but what they've done not only in sports but anything else in their lives. So it's kind of an introduction into Vitae is where we ultimately want them to be. But the foundational exposure for them should be, hey, I played on a high school football team, or my uncle was a linebacker at Notre Dame, or I had a hole-in-one at Sharon Heights Golf and Country Club, or I bowled a 300 game in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I mean, these are all things about your achievements, and I would find it very interesting to find out almost anything. I mean, I found out you were a Penn State club soccer guy. I don't even know if people on this broadcast know that, but that takes a little bit of either research or knowing somebody, and it's like a thing I will remember. Right.
Yeah. No, it's fast. Is there any, I don't know, that you can share like timeline on when you think Vitae is going to be out? And
sure. We've already got an initial rebranding underway. It's more of an augmentative rebranding. So we don't want to abandon YourSports because it really is a reflection of so much of the foundation we've laid, but in fairness, it has also alienated some people that think it's only going to be sports. And some people like sports, but there are a lot of music, entertainment, travel, politics. There's so many other things to life. And even for the most hardcore sports fan, they generally have other interests as well. They're going to read books, they're going to go to movies, they're going to go to concerts and plays, and they're going to want to travel, and they camp at national parks, and they visit beaches and want to be on a cruise in the Caribbean. There are a lot of things that go on in life. It's not just as much as we like to think, as I'm a hardcore sports fan. And yes, I was watching every minute of the Warriors last night. I do live and die for sports teams. However, it's not my whole life, because there are 24 hours in the day, and only 18 of them are spent on Vitae.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely. I love it. Is there anything, before I ask my final question, is there anything else that we didn't get to, things you wanted to talk about? Trying to think.
Well, one thing I'd say for one of our goals is at Vitae, at YourSports, is we want to make it the kind of platform where everybody feels that they should plug in. I mean, it's free to join. So, and it's an authentic identity platform. So you're not joining as, San Jose, Salvador, 65. No, you're joining as who you are. You are a person. You were on teams or you weren't. You attended schools or you weren't. You worked at places or you weren't. You belonged to an organization or you didn't.
Yeah.
We don't need that BS. You can save that kind of anonymous moniker-based stuff for Yahoo Sports message boards and where people are going to be flaming and insulting each other. We want a civilized discourse about sports and the rest of your life as well. And part of this is once you have a quality relationship with people where you know who they are, right? Am I more likely to take a recommendation or a suggestion from you, Dave, for whatever, a restaurant, go see this movie about climbing, go try this brand of bourbon? I'm much more likely to take a recommendation from somebody that I know or where I see how I'm connected to them.
Absolutely.
Then, if I'm on Yelp and it just says this restaurant's great, I mean, I don't know who that person is. I don't know whether they've even been at that restaurant or whether they're employed by the restaurant or they have a grudge against the kitchen manager. I don't know that. But when it's somebody that I know that, hey, went to the same school or was in the same fraternity or served in the Marine Corps like I did or whatever it may be, I'm much more interested in getting an opinion from them because it's more trusted. It's more relevant because, a Green Bay Packer fan should be able to tell me, where I'm going to get a beer and brats when I'm visiting for a game. I want to have more quality, more relevance in content, in discovery. I mean, that's what we really ultimately are, a discovery platform. You want to discover what? New things to do. We're going into this world, millennials are all into experiences, right? I mean, it's true that we're starting to realize that life is much more about experiences, places you can go, things you can see, things box check, right? We have a thing called the bucket list, and we've got a bucket and a bucket list, and that's like what are the things you've done, and then what are the things that are aspirational for you? What have you yet to see? What stadiums have you yet to be at? What events would you like to see live? And that is how you map out what your motivated future can look like. And so I want to encourage people to sign up for the platform. It's free, and then use it to connect with their friends, connect to your podcasts, and be able to learn more about the things that they love. People don't even realize how much with a little bit of organized exposure to research and content, how much more fun it can be. And then when you share it with other people, that's the key. It's when you get a comment, someone's making a funny comment about a performance. Last night somebody misses a dunk, and I'd much rather hear it from one of my friends than from some guy in Buffalo that I don't know. Yeah. And so the Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, these are all platforms with great value, and each has its own individual use case, and different constituents will benefit from those. But when we like to think that we're doing something completely different that will also, leave a digital footprint of your time here on Earth. And for those that feel what they're doing with their lives is worthwhile, and don't want to live off the grid. We're not a platform for people that want to live off the grid. You can decide how much you want to share. But, if you're not going to share anything about yourself, don't bother, because that's not the life we're trying to live. We want people to live connected.
All right. I love it. Yeah. All that resonates with me. And so I'm really excited. So we have YourSports, the website and social media all linked in the video description if you're watching on YouTube or podcast show notes. Is that the best place if you were encouraging people to sign up? Is that still the best place? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. YourSports is the URL, and will be for the immediate foreseeable future. And we'll be communicating as we continue to expand the brand rather than completely replace. But we're still very much a sports platform that's trying to take over the world.
All right. I love it. So everybody make sure to go check that out. Last question that I have for you. What's the thing you're most excited about happening in your soccer world? You can take it to mean more your sports world. So what's the thing you're most excited about?
I'm excited that the month of June is going to involve a lot of women's soccer with the world, with the World Cup and with the U.S. national team. And I met recently with a former member of the national team. Actually, she was on both the U.S. and the Canadian national team. It just got me fired up, because these women work so hard and they're so good, and yet as the sport continues to develop for them, or hopefully continues to develop, it's really tough for even the top level, the women's soccer pyramid in this country, to have people that are that dedicated to being world class and try and make a living playing soccer. I mean, if you're not on the national team and you're getting sort of a combined sponsorship deal, geez, I mean, some of these women it's tough for them to get a chip sponsor, like getting a bag of Doritos, much less get any kind of a lifestyle enhancing or sustaining sponsorship deal. So there's not, I mean, you can't control all market dynamics. I mean, there has to be demand for women's soccer. People have to be willing to watch and be willing to go watch them play. I would argue that the way for that to progress is to have a better appreciation among fans for who these people are. What can you know about them? What do they look like? What are their friendships on the team? What nonprofit organizations are they involved with off the field? Because otherwise, if you're just tuning in to a women's soccer game, unless you know somebody or they're representing your state or your city or your region, whatever it may be, it's going to be a little tough because you have so many options. I mean, that's the same for men's soccer as well. I mean, I love watching rugby, and when I'm watching the Chiefs or, I'm watching like Australian or New Zealand or South African rugby teams. I mean, I don't know any of the individuals. And that's a lot different than when when the Patriots are playing the Raiders and I know every guy 3 deep in the starting lineup for the Raiders. That's a lot different experience for me. So that buy-in doesn't happen unless you say, okay, here's a chance for me, the national team. We're going to watch the women's national team, the WNT, right? And we're gonna say, let's pay attention to who they are, and what colleges did they go to, and what are they doing in their lives? Are they also? Half of them are like going to medical school or doing something else awesome on the side, right? But these are amazingly talented. The games are exciting. I mean, whether it's the Olympics or the World Cup, when you see these nation versus nation things, obviously that's a great motivator for fans that have an affiliation with their own country or one that they have an interest in. If you're a Francophile or a Germanophile or whatever you may be, you take a particular interest in that. Having that chance to get to know the members of the team, which it's constantly changing. People are coming up, falling off the team. We've had some stability with some major, headliner stars, whether it's Rapinoe or Morgan, or, I mean, you had some big names, but how many people in this country even know who they are? And how many of them would recognize them on the street? Because they're not getting the same exposure. And you can't say that should happen. There's not a right to that. It just has to be, you have to find the right audience, develop a consistent rapport with that audience, and have them recognize and appreciate the personalities. Because if it's just the game, it'll never grow.
Yeah, no, I'm extremely excited for this World Cup. I think it might be a watershed moment for the women's game because it's already happening to a certain extent in Europe. The major European countries are starting to take more of an interest. Sponsors are starting to line up. I had a call this morning with a friend from the Netherlands, and he was talking about how sponsors are really starting to flow in. And I'm really hopeful that this World Cup.
Well, I think I might be willing to sponsor the Dutch women's soccer team myself.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, they're one of the favorites as well. So I'm excited.
But that is a problem, though, right? Now you have the European team starting to kick it up a notch, right?
So it's a problem for the U.S.,
Spain, France, Netherlands, Germany. I mean, when those and now for the teams that have been so successful, the U.S., Canada, Norway. I mean, Sweden, they could see a lot more competition going forward. Maybe that's great for the game.
I think it's good for the game.
We'll see if it's great for the U.S.
Yeah,
it's been we've had trouble growing the game with the women winning almost everything, or at least occasionally winning almost everything. I mean, they've been very high profile and one of the favorites for most of the international competitions, whether it be Olympics or World Cup. Well, if that changes and we get back to being more like the men's position where we're lucky to qualify for a World Cup, I mean, hopefully that's a long way away and won't ever happen. But let's face it, I don't know that without the right resources and the right sponsorship and all, we could sustain the level they've been on. And I mean, my gosh, people need to appreciate how good they've been.
Absolutely. And I personally think the better competition will, raise the level of the women's national team, but they won't be winning every competition. But again, I think that's a good sign. So
we as a country, we tend to be front runners.
Yeah.
It's when you look at what's happened in tennis, for example, or even to an extent golf, when the Europeans start dominating, and you don't have, I remember when in the days of John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors, and tennis was a must see TV for Americans, and even with Sampras and Agassi and all. But in recent years, it's been fewer and further between, and so people get a little tired of watching Swiss and Croatians, and it gets harder.
Yeah, so I guess we'll see what happens. But I'm very excited about the Women's World Cup as well, kicking off later this week. So, Jim, thank you again coming here live in person. First interview guest making it down here, so really appreciate it. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Nope, just appreciate the beautiful game and the challenge of trying to cover it in a way that's never been done before. It's an incredible challenge, and yet super fun, and I've probably learned more than I ever thought I would about the game.
All right, absolutely. So thank you again for being here. Listeners, make sure to go check out YourSports on the website, sign up for a profile, go check them out on social media and all that. So, Jim, thanks again. Listeners, viewers, thank you for being here. And we'll talk to you soon, everybody. See ya.